If global politics of the 21st century had to be defined by one or two events, then there's no better example than 9/11 and the American governments to it. Both of the events have shaped how we look at the world significantly.
Two airplanes have crashed into the World Trade Center.
They have brought changes to our security and have made us vary about our neighbors and, most importantly, tell us about the state of power, especially of America in global politics.
This does not spiral out of control.
Today on Behind the Date, we will look back at two events, one being one of the most devastating terrorist attacks in the world, and the other being its far-reaching, complicated, and equally devastating reaction by the Americans in late 9/11 attacks. The 9/11 terrorist attacks are arguably one of the most significant events in modern history. On the morning of September 11, 2001, 19 terrorists affiliated with the Islamic extremist group Al-Qaeda hijacked 4 passenger airplanes. 2 of the planes were flown into the World Trade Center towers in New York City, 1 into the Pentagon in Washington, D.C., and the 4th crashed in a field in Pennsylvania. The attacks resulted in the deaths of nearly 3,000 people and injured over 6,000. The hijackers forced their way into the cockpits to take control of the planes and intended to use them as weapons to strike the United States, a nation they viewed as a symbol of Western decadence. The attacks have been called the first act of war in the 21st century, and the events of that day and the resulting effects have reverberated through the years and have changed the world in countless ways. The 9/11 attacks had a profound impact on everyone. On one hand, the attacks sparked a resurgence of patriotism and national pride, but on the other hand, also led to an increase in racism and xenophobia, as many Americans began to view Muslims and Middle Eastern immigrants with suspicion. The first and most visible response to the 9/11 attacks was the passage of the USA Patriot Act in October 2001. This act gave the federal government unprecedented powers to monitor and investigate terrorism suspects, including the power to search homes and businesses without a warrant, and to access personal banking and phone records without a court order. The law also allowed for the indefinite detention of foreign nationals suspected of terrorist activity. The U.S. government also created the Department of Homeland Security in 2002 in order to better coordinate the nation's anti-terror efforts. This new agency was tasked with securing the nation's borders and preventing future attacks. The department was also given the authority to gather and analyze intelligence, detect and deter terrorist activity, and respond to natural disasters and other threats. The most famous initiative taken by the government was the War on Terror, which were a series of military operations across the globe to combat terrorism. The primary goal of the War on Terror is to eliminate terrorist organizations and networks and to prevent any future attacks against the United States or its allies. The War on Terror has been carried out in many forms, including the use of military force, economic sanctions, and diplomatic efforts. In particular, the U.S. has employed a surge strategy in Iraq and Afghanistan, wherein additional troops and resources were deployed to the region to combat terrorism. This strategy has been credited with reducing the threat of terrorism in the two nations, though it has also been criticized for its cost and the civilian casualties it has caused. The U.S. has also sought to disrupt terrorist financing by targeting organizations such as Al-Qaeda and ISIS. This has included freezing assets, disrupting money laundering operations, and passing legislation that makes it more difficult for terrorists to acquire funds. In addition, the U.S. has sought to counter radicalization by cutting off the flow of foreign fighters, as well as by countering extremist propaganda. The American government also worked closely with its allies by forming international coalitions and intelligence sharing agreements, as well as providing training and material support to regional partners. In particular, the U.S. has worked closely with regional allies such as Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates to target terrorist networks in the Middle East. The war on terror has also led to some famous successes, including the killing of Al-Qaeda leader Osama bin Laden in 2011. However, it has also been criticized as being overly militarized and costly, and for failing to address the root causes of terrorism, such as poverty and political grievances. In addition, the war on terror has been seen as a catalyst for further unrest in the Middle East, with the rise of ISIS being one of its most troubling outcomes. And all this unrest started with the invasion of Iraq in 2003, which was based on a speculation that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction. America's invasion of Iraq in 2003 was a highly controversial event that continues to have significant implications to this day. The stated but baseless purpose of the invasion was to remove Saddam Hussein from power and to eliminate any potential weapons of mass destruction, WMD, that posed a threat to the United States and the world. The invasion was led by the United States with the support of a coalition of the willing, which included the United Kingdom, Australia, Spain, Poland, and a number of other nations. On March 20, 2003, U.S. forces launched a massive aerial bombing campaign targeting the Iraqi military and government. This was followed by a ground invasion of Iraq by coalition forces. The ground campaign was relatively short, lasting only a few weeks, and resulted in the capture of Baghdad. Saddam Hussein's government was quickly overthrown, and the country was occupied by coalition forces. Critics of the invasion argued that it was illegal under international law and a violation of the UN Charter. They also argued that the Bush administration had exaggerated or fabricated evidence of the presence of WMDs in order to justify the war. Supporters of the invasion, on the other hand, argued that it was necessary to remove a despotic regime and to ensure the safety of the American people. The consequences for the Iraqi people, though, were far-reaching. The invasion destabilized the region and led to a prolonged period of conflict and violence. It also resulted in the deaths of hundreds of thousands of Iraqis, as well as thousands of coalition soldiers. Iraq also experienced a rapid decline in security, with violence between competing sectarian groups becoming endemic. The US-led coalition forces were unable to gain control of the situation, and the country's infrastructure was largely destroyed. The lack of security and the weakening of the government enabled the emergence of a militant extremist group, ISIS, in 2014. The group was able to take advantage of the security vacuum and the weakened government to establish itself as a powerful force in the region. ISIS has been brutal in its tactics, and in the process of seizing territory, it has perpetrated numerous human rights abuses, including extrajudicial killings, torture, and rape. The group has also been responsible for numerous attacks in Iraq and Syria, as well as other countries, including those in Europe and North America. The group has also been linked to numerous terrorist attacks, and its ideology has inspired other terrorist groups around the world. The fight against ISIS has been ongoing, with the United States leading a coalition of countries that have sought to degrade and eventually eliminate the group. While some progress has been made, the fight has been arduous, and the group continues to pose a threat to the region and beyond. Overall, if you may ask, this act of revenge by America has been nothing but a disaster. If you liked the video, hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. We post interesting stories from around the every other day.